11 days after Israel assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in an airstrike on a Beirut suburb, Israel said it had killed his replacement. That's according to Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. In a video released on Tuesday, Gallant said Hezbollah is an organization without a head. Nasrallah was eliminated. His replacement was probably also eliminated. Gallant gave no further details, but appeared to be referring to Hashem Safiaddin, who has not been heard from publicly since an Israeli airstrike last week. Hezbollah has not commented on Gallant's claim. Safiaddin is a cousin to Nasrallah. As head of Hezbollah's executive council, he has overseen the group's political affairs while also sitting on the Jihad Council, which manages its military operations. Safiaddin was not at the September 27th Hezbollah meeting in Beirut's southern suburbs when Israel struck, killing Nasrallah. He had been expected to be named the group's next Secretary General. His death would mark another in a series of top Hezbollah commanders killed by Israel in recent weeks. The fighting between Israel and the Lebanese militant group has escalated dramatically, with Israeli commandos raiding Hezbollah bases in southern Lebanon. The Israeli military said it was conducting, quote, limited, localized, targeted operations in Lebanon's southwest, having previously announced such operations in the southeast. Video released by the Israeli army on Tuesday purported to show a captured Hezbollah compound, replete with artillery and anti-tank weaponry. Hezbollah and Israel have traded fire for the past year, with the militia group launching rockets into Israel in support of Hamas, following its October 7th attack. On Tuesday, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 100 rockets over the border toward Haifa and the Galilee. In a televised speech on Tuesday, Hezbollah deputy leader Naim Qassem said he supported efforts to secure a truce. He said the group's capabilities were intact, despite what he called painful blows from Israel. It was the first time that he had not mentioned an end to the war in Gaza as a precondition for halting combat on the Israel-Lebanon border.
Palestinians held a funeral on Tuesday for more than 15 killed in an Israeli attack, which struck a camp for displaced people in Gaza's Deir al-Balah overnight. That's according to Gaza's health ministry. Witnesses said the airstrike destroyed buildings and tents. The air and ground offensive into the territory is ongoing. Residents of Gaza's Jabalia said Israel had sent tanks deeper into their city on Tuesday, advising people to leave while it pounded the refugee camp from the air. Israel has said its attack on Jabalia was an attempt to stop Hamas fighters from regrouping there and staging attacks. Health officials said dozens had been killed in Gaza in the past 24 hours. The armed wing of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad said fighters had attacked Israeli forces in the north with anti-tank rockets, and that there were casualties among Israeli troops. These attacks came a day after the first anniversary of the Israel-Hamas war, which saw Hamas militants storm through Israeli towns, killing 1,200 and taking around 250 hostages, according to Israel's tallies. Israel's retaliatory offensive in Gaza has killed nearly 42,000 Palestinians, the enclave's health ministry says. Most of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been displaced, and humanitarian conditions have deteriorated sharply.
Mozambicans are voting on Wednesday in an election that's almost certain to see the ruling party, Frelimo, maintain its half-century grip on power. But whoever wins will inherit an economy being battered on several fronts. It's not completely certain who will win this election. President Filipe Nyusi is stepping down after 2 terms, and as Frelimo party's candidate, Daniel Chapo, is widely expected to replace him. But the former radio announcer and law lecturer faces an independent candidate who has captured the support of disenchanted youth. Political analysts like Adriano Nuvunga say Venancio Mondlane poses the biggest threat to Frelimo in years, though Nuvunga thinks the status quo will remain.
Mozambique's democracy is Frelimo dominated, is Frelimo captured.
Frelimo has ruled the Southeast African nation since independence from Portugal in 1975. Since first allowing elections in 1994, opponents and election observers have consistently accused Frelimo of rigging them. It denies the accusation. The winner of the election will face a tight squeeze on the economy as the country emerges from a financial crisis. Rising borrowing costs are piling the pressure on its 34+ million people.
There are a lack of opportunities in this country. There is no employment for youth.
The country is also struggling with debt nearly as big as its annual GDP. And delayed gas revenues mean it's running out of options to refinance its debt. Mozambique is still reeling from a decade-old so-called tuna bond scandal. It involved loans for a fishing fleet, partly funded by Credit Suisse, that went missing. That led the country to default on its debt and the International Monetary Fund to suspend lending. Last year, the Swiss bank settled out of court, and Mozambique struck a $456 million deal with the IMF in 2022. But that program expires next year and will have to be renegotiated. Islamic State-linked militants launched an insurgency in a gas-rich northern province in 2017. It's killed thousands of civilians, destroyed livelihoods, and internally displaced hundreds of thousands, aid agencies say. It has also disrupted multi-billion-dollar energy projects that are seen as the future of the country's economy. The government has contained the insurgency with help from regional troops and Rwanda, but there has been a surge in deadly attacks since the start of the year. Mozambique is also one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, vulnerable to extreme climate shocks like droughts, cyclones and floods. Cyclone Freddy tore through Mozambique last year, as well as neighboring Malawi and Madagascar. It was one of the deadliest to hit the continent in 2 decades, killing over 1,000 people.
Kitchens like this have been a crucial safety net for those left destitute by Sudan's war. But after 17 months of violence, the volunteers who run them say dangers and a lack of funds are making it difficult to continue. The conflict between Sudan's military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has created the world's largest hunger and displacement crisis. In the northern countryside of Omdurman, beneficiary Hafiz Abdallah says families are completely dependent on this kitchen for all their meals.
If I didn't get a meal for any reason, I would be really affected as I cannot afford a meal for the children.
The backdrop is that international aid organisations, including the United Nations, have been struggling to get aid to those who need it most. Relief workers say both sides have deployed siege-like tactics to prevent food and other supplies reaching their opponents. Instead, international organisations have ramped up their support for community groups. However, 10 volunteers told Reuters that the groups have been turned into targets for looters from the RSF. Both sides have also attacked or detained volunteers on suspicion of collaborating with their opponents, 12 volunteers said.
They are on the front line.
Mathilde Vu is advocacy manager for the Norwegian Refugee Council. It began supporting local responders in Sudan last year.
They're being detained, they're being harassed, they're being looted. And, this is all part of the warring parties not respecting really the protection of civilians, right? And not also seeing that these people are a key chain of the humanitarian system. And under international humanitarian law, they should be protected. And frankly, they're not right now.
Many communal kitchens are operated by a loose network of community groups known as emergency response rooms. Both the Army and RSF distrust them. That's because they include people who were members of grassroots resistance committees that led pro-democracy protests in 2019. That uprising toppled former autocrat Omar al-Bashir. The army joined forces with the RSF to stage a military coup 2 years later, but rivalries between them erupted into open warfare in April 2023. Both the RSF and the Sudanese Armed Forces did not respond to requests for comment for this report. The RSF has previously denied targeting aid workers. It said any rogue elements who did so would be brought to justice. The military has also said it does not target aid workers. However, it says anyone who collaborates with the RSF is subject to arrest. A UN fact-finding mission has said that 65 cases tried by army-convened courts against alleged commanders and employees of the RSF as of June, 63 targeted activists and humanitarian workers. They include members of emergency response rooms, the mission said in its report. Meanwhile, hunger is spreading. UN officials say more than 25.6 million people, more than half Sudan's population, are experiencing acute hunger and need urgent assistance. Parts of the country are at risk of famine, and in the worst hit areas, residents have resorted to eating dirt and leaves. Emergency response rooms have set up 419 kitchens that aim to serve over 1 million people daily in Khartoum state alone. That's according to one state organiser, Abdallah Gamar. He said volunteers have struggled to secure the $1,175,000 needed every month. In September, he said they received around $614,000. At the kitchen in Omdurman, Supervisor Heba El Sanossi says they only receive a few donations. Aid is distributed by the government, she says, and most of it does not reach them. If just a part of this aid arrived, she says, we could serve the community better.
North Korea's army has said it will completely cut off roads and railways connected to South Korea, starting from Wednesday. That announcement on state broadcaster KCNA likely indicates a further escalation in activity close to the demarcation line separating the two Koreas. In recent years, such activity had been rare. But this year, according to South Korea's military in July, North Korea has spent months installing landmines and barriers and creating wasteland across the heavily militarized border. The General Staff of the Korean People's Army said in a statement on KCNA that it was responding to war exercises that have been held in South Korea. The statement, which called South Korea the primary hostile state and invariable principal enemy, also pointed to frequent visits by US strategic nuclear assets in the region. South Korea's defense ministry said that the United Nations Command had been notified, but declined to give specifics. The UNC is a US-led multinational military force that oversees affairs in the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas, which remain technically at war.
In Chile, organic waste from food markets has become a lifeline for ranchers struggling during drought. An NGO called Refeeding Foundation has amassed a network of 600 volunteers that collect food waste from Santiago markets so the group can reuse it as livestock feed. Refeeding Foundation's president, Cristobal Marino, explains.
On average, we are collecting 10 tons of organic surplus, which go to different areas of water scarcity, or drought in this case. And these are families whose livelihoods depend on animals.
Marino says they have successfully converted over 800 tons of organic waste into animal feed. It's really good because at this moment we are lacking forage for the animals, says this farmer. Chile has been experiencing severe drought in recent years that has disrupted local industries such as agriculture, mining, and beekeeping. While an El Niño weather pattern brought strong winter rains and snow in the middle of the year, a La Niña pattern is in the forecast, which could indicate drier weather.